The twin suns of Zyrathia hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the jagged mountains and glowing deserts that stretched beyond the horizon. The wind carried fine, red dust that scratched against the metal of the human trade outpost like sandpaper. Dr. Ethan Hale adjusted his protective goggles and shielded his face as he stepped out of the small transport pod. Around him, Zyrathian soldiers moved with disciplined precision, their tall, lean bodies covered in armor that shimmered in the harsh light. Their eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the landscape with a sense of ownership, as though the planet itself belonged to them alone. Ethan was a human. Among the Zyrathians, that made him an outsider, a weakling, someone whose presence was tolerated only because of the knowledge and skills he brought to the outpost. He had been assigned to study Zyrathia's unique mineral formations, but his work had recently taken an unexpected turn. What had started as a simple geological survey had become something dangerous. Something that threatened not only the humans in the enclave, but also the Zyrathians themselves. He ducked behind a jagged rock formation, careful to keep himself hidden from the patrols that roamed the desert in pairs. His hand shook slightly as he held a small device in front of him, scanning the energy signatures coming from the Council's hidden facility nearby. The readings were alarming. The energy spikes indicated that the Council was conducting experiments with a weapon of unimaginable power. Civilians, both human and Zyrathian, were being used as test subjects. Ethan's stomach churned. He had expected to find minerals or maybe some strange natural phenomena, not evidence of mass cruelty. A sudden movement caught his eye. A shadow detached itself from the dunes and moved quickly toward him. Ethan froze, his pulse quickening. The shadow resolved into the form of a Zyrathian soldier, weapon raised. He knew there was no time to run. He was outnumbered, unarmed except for the small scanning device in his hand, and utterly alone. Before the soldier could fire, a second figure appeared. She moved like liquid, fast and precise, her presence commanding immediate attention. Her armor gleamed under the twin suns, etched with symbols that marked her rank and prowess. She raised her hand, and the attacking soldier froze, eyes wide in surprise. "Step back," she said, her voice firm and calm, carrying the weight of authority. The soldier hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. The woman approached Ethan, her eyes sharp and assessing. She was tall, powerful, and unlike any Zyrathian he had seen before. Her movements were confident, almost regal, yet there was something in her gaze that suggested an openness, a willingness to see beyond the surface. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone carrying curiosity rather than suspicion. "I'm Dr. Ethan Hale," he said carefully, keeping his hands visible. "I'm a researcher. I didn't mean to trespass. I was just looking at the minerals in this region." He had been trained to keep a calm exterior, but the truth could not be hidden any longer. I discovered something," he admitted, his voice trembling. "Something dangerous. The Council, they're experimenting on civilians. They're weaponizing people." "Weaponizing humans and Zyrathians?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. "I have evidence. I can show you." He held out the scanning device. The readouts glowed with energy signatures, patterns, and readings that confirmed his words. For a long moment, she simply stared at the device, then back at him. Her posture shifted, a subtle change that indicated a decision had been made. "Follow me," she said, and without waiting for a reply, she turned and led him toward a narrow canyon hidden from the patrols. Her movements were precise and calculated, as if she had done this many times before. Ethan struggled to keep up, his lungs burning in the thin, dry air. They reached a concealed entrance behind a rock face. The woman pressed her palm against a small panel, and the rock slid aside, revealing a hidden passage that led deep into the mountains. The air inside was cooler, damp with condensation, and smelled faintly of earth and stone. Ethan looked around in awe. This was not just a hiding place. It was a secure zone, likely unknown to most Zyrathians. "Who are you?" Ethan asked again, his voice quieter now, filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "I am Kera," she said simply. "Commander Kera, I protect this sector of the Empire, and you are about to become a problem for the Council. I just want to stop them from hurting people." He had read about the warrior codes of Zyrathia, strict and unyielding, and he knew the consequences for defying the Council could be severe. As they moved deeper into the hidden passages, Ethan began to notice the subtle differences in Kelara's demeanor. She was not just a soldier. She was a strategist, a thinker, someone who had questioned the world around her. The walls of the cavern were lined with supplies, maps, and instruments that hinted at careful planning. This was a sanctuary, and perhaps the beginning of something much larger. Kera led him to a small chamber with a wide opening overlooking the canyon below. The wind whistled through the rocks, carrying with it the scent of the desert. She turned to him, her expression serious. "You must understand," she said. "The council is powerful. They will not forgive betrayal. If word of this reaches them, it will mean war and death. You have courage, human. That is why you will survive longer than most would in your position. But courage alone is not enough. You must learn, adapt, and be ready for what is coming." Over the next hours, Kera taught him basic survival techniques, how to move silently in the canyon, and how to avoid the patrols. She explained the council's hierarchy and their influence over the empire, helping him understand the scale of the challenge they faced. Ethan absorbed every detail, his mind racing with plans and ideas. As night fell, the twin moons rose, casting a pale glow over the jagged landscape. Ethan sat beside Kera, exhausted but alert. The stars above were unlike anything he had seen from Earth, brilliant and countless, stretching across the sky in waves of color. It was humbling and yet empowering. "Why me?" Ethan asked finally, unable to contain his curiosity. "Why risk everything for a human?" This was more than protection. It was trust, an unspoken bond forming between them. He realized that survival would require more than hiding. It would require understanding each other, combining human creativity with Zyrathian strength. Hours passed, and the desert wind carried with it distant sounds of patrols. Ethan and Kera remained vigilant, knowing that the council would soon discover his presence. But for now, they had a moment of calm, a fragile space to plan, to prepare, and to learn about each other. Ethan gazed at the moons and the stars, feeling a strange sense of purpose. He had discovered a terrible truth, and it had put him in danger, but it had also brought him here to Kera, to a chance to fight for something greater than himself. In that hidden canyon, surrounded by the harsh beauty of Zyrathia, the human and the warrior sat together, knowing that the days ahead would test them in ways neither could imagine. Yet, for the first time, Ethan felt ready. Not because he was strong, but because he was not alone. And Kera, the fierce warrior of the Zyrathian Empire, had decided that this human was worth protecting. The hidden canyon was quiet, but the tension in the air was thick. Ethan had barely slept, his mind spinning with the implications of what he had discovered. The council's weapon was far worse than anything he could have imagined, and the fact that it targeted civilians made it even more horrifying. He could not ignore it. Every second that passed meant more lives were at risk. Kera had been watching him carefully as he studied the device's readings again. Her posture was rigid as always, but there was a subtle softness in her expression, a mixture of concern and calculation. She knew that protecting him meant risking everything. If the council discovered him here, it would not just be his life that was in danger, but hers as well. "You realize what this means, don't you?" Kera said finally, her voice low but firm. "You've exposed yourself to the council's wrath. They will stop at nothing to recover the evidence and to eliminate witnesses. And yet something about you makes me believe you are telling the truth." She paused, glancing at the scanning device. "If what you say is true, the council has crossed lines even I never thought they would, and that cannot stand. But you must understand, we cannot act openly. We must move carefully, quietly. The council has eyes everywhere." Ordinary citizens had little knowledge of what was happening, and anyone who tried to speak out vanished without a trace. "They call it progress," Kera said bitterly. "But it is destruction. They are testing this weapon on our people as if they were nothing more than tools. I have seen it with my own eyes. Yes, I have led patrols near the testing zones. The screams of the civilians, the panic, it haunts me. That is why I cannot let them continue. That is why I cannot allow them to hurt you either. I'll do whatever it takes to stop them." Ethan followed Kera closely, learning how to navigate the rough terrain with stealth and precision. She taught him how to read the subtle signs of movement in the desert, the shifting dust, the glint of sunlight on metal, the sound of distant footsteps. "Survival is not just about strength," Kera explained as they crouched behind a ridge. "It is about perception, timing, and anticipation. You must think ahead, human. Always anticipate what others will do before they act." As they trekked deeper into the canyon, Kera told him more about the council's recent experiments. They were testing the weapon's ability to harness and amplify energy from living beings, converting life force into a devastating power source. Entire communities had been sacrificed, their homes destroyed, and yet the council reported successful trials with no mention of the cost. Ethan shuddered. How can they do this? How can they call themselves leaders? That is the danger of the council. They have no conscience, no compassion, only ambition. By mid-afternoon, they reached a secluded plateau where the wind swept across the rocks in powerful gusts. Kera had prepared a small camp here, hidden behind jagged outcroppings. Supplies were minimal but sufficient: water, rations, and some basic equipment for recording evidence. It was not comfortable, but it was safe, for now. Here we can plan our next move, Kera said, scanning the horizon for any signs of patrols. We must gather as much evidence as possible and avoid detection. Every minute we delay, the Council's power grows stronger. The patterns of energy readings, the strange fluctuations, and the hidden chambers all pointed to one undeniable truth. The Council's weapon was real, and it was deadly. Kera watched him, her eyes thoughtful. You see what others would ignore. That is rare, human. Most would have left after discovering the danger, fearing for their own lives. But you understand responsibility. I'll do whatever it takes. Ethan contributed by analyzing energy patterns, identifying areas of high activity, and predicting where experiments were most likely to occur. The combination of human ingenuity and Zyrathian experience proved effective. They began to develop a strategy to infiltrate the facility, gather concrete evidence, and escape undetected. It was risky, but it was the only way to expose the Council's crimes to the Empire. As night fell, the twin moons rose over the horizon, bathing the canyon in silver light. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the dangerous path the two were taking. Ethan and Kera huddled near the small campfire, discussing their next steps. You must understand, Kera said softly. Once we move, there is no turning back. The Council will hunt you relentlessly. You cannot hesitate and you cannot show weakness. One mistake could cost us everything. A chance is all we need. Courage and determination can achieve more than brute force alone. Even humans have a role to play in shaping this universe, Ethan. Never forget that. He had always believed in science and reason, but now he understood that morality, courage, and the willingness to act were just as powerful. Humans, though physically weaker than Zyrathians, had something unique: the ability to inspire change, to see injustice and refuse to accept it. As the night deepened, they took turns keeping watch, listening to the distant sounds of the desert and the faint hum of the Council's patrols. Despite the danger, Ethan felt a connection to Kera, a bond forged not through words alone, but through shared risk, trust, and the understanding that they were both fighting for something greater than themselves. When dawn broke, the first light of the twin suns glinted off the rocky plateau. Ethan and Kera stood side by side, looking out over the landscape that held both danger and opportunity. The day ahead would be filled with planning, stealth, and preparation. The Council would not relent, and the weapon they sought to expose would not stop for them. But for the first time, Ethan felt ready to face the challenges. Not because he was strong, but because he had Kera by his side, and because he knew that humans, even in a universe dominated by stronger alien species, could make a difference. Together, they would fight. Not for power, not for glory, but for justice, truth, and the lives of countless innocents. And in that determination, they would find strength greater than any weapon, and courage stronger than any fear. The desert wind swept across the plateau, carrying with it the promise of action, the stirrings of rebellion, and the hope that even a human could change the fate of an empire. The canyon was alive with tension as the twin suns began their slow descent. Ethan and Kera moved swiftly, using the jagged rocks and narrow passes to remain unseen. The patrols were close. The Council's elite hunters had been dispatched as soon as news of the fugitive humans spread through the Empire. The hunters were relentless, trained to detect the faintest trace of movement, yet Kelera's knowledge of the terrain and Ethan's quick thinking allowed them to stay ahead, for now. Kera crouched behind a rock, signaling Ethan to stop. She raised a hand, then pointed to the faint tracks in the red sand below. They are splitting into two groups, she whispered. One will circle back to cut off escape routes. We must move fast, human. Your mind will be as important as my skill today. But the fear was tempered by something else, a determination that humans could endure, adapt, and overcome. Look, Kera said, pointing toward a distant rock formation. There is a narrow pass ahead, too small for patrols to enter easily. We can use it to our advantage. But it was dangerous. A single misstep could send them tumbling into the jagged rocks below. Together, they sprinted across the open stretch, leaping over boulders and ducking under jagged outcrops. The council hunters had caught a glimpse of movement, but Kelara's sharp instincts kept them just out of range. One of the hunters fired a pulse shot, but the energy dissipated harmlessly against a natural stone barrier. Ethan's heart raced as he kept pace with Kera. Her speed, agility, and precision were astonishing. He felt clumsy in comparison, but he remembered her words. Courage and ingenuity were just as valuable as strength. He spotted a natural overhang and signaled to Kera. Using a combination of human ingenuity and Kelara's knowledge, they rigged a simple trap, a rockslide mechanism that would block the narrow path behind them. As the hunters approached the pass, a cascade of rocks thundered down, forcing them to retreat. Kera smirked. "Not bad, human," she said. "Your mind works well under pressure." It was the first time he felt that human cleverness could truly make a difference in this alien world. They continued through the canyon, eventually reaching a plateau overlooking a vast expanse of desert dotted with jagged mesas and crumbling ruins. From this vantage point, Ethan could see patrols sweeping the ground below, searching for any sign of them. Kera set up a temporary observation point. Using a combination of optical devices and Ethan's scanning technology, they began to map the patrol's movements. Patterns emerged, showing predictable paths and blind spots. "This is how we will strike," Kera said, her voice steady. "We will gather evidence, expose the council, and avoid direct confrontation. We cannot afford mistakes." Shadows stretched long and deep, and the temperature dropped sharply. Ethan shivered under his light jacket, but Kera moved with ease. She pointed out hidden ledges, narrow cliffs, and overhangs that provided perfect cover for their movements. "Rest if you must," she said, "but keep your senses sharp. The hunters may use night vision and other devices to track us." Kera kept watch while Ethan reviewed patrol movements, calculated the risks, and suggested alternative routes for their journey. It was a strange partnership, human creativity meeting Xyrathian discipline. And yet it worked. Eventually, Kera allowed herself a brief rest. She studied Ethan carefully, noting the determination in his eyes. "You are not like most humans I have encountered," she said softly. "Most would panic, flee blindly, or give up entirely. You adapt, you think, you persist." "I've had to survive before," Ethan said quietly. "But never like this. I didn't know I could do it until now." The terrain grew harsher, with cliffs and canyons narrowing into tight corridors. Kera led Ethan along a winding path that only a few Xyrathians would dare to navigate. As they approached the outskirts of the facility, Ethan's scanning device picked up energy fluctuations unlike anything he had seen. The weapon was active, and experiments were ongoing. Civilians, both human and Xyrathian, were being moved in and out of structures at alarming speeds. Kelara's jaw tightened. "They are escalating. We have little time." Kelara's knowledge of patrol schedules, combined with Ethan's analytical skills, allowed them to slip past sensors and cameras. It was a delicate balance of risk and timing, but they succeeded in reaching a vantage point overlooking the main testing area. Ethan gasped at the sight. Dozens of civilians were being herded into energy containment chambers, the pulses of the weapon visible as streams of light surrounding them. The readings confirmed what he had feared. The council was converting life force into energy for the weapon, and the process was deadly. Kera placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, we are observers here, not heroes. One mistake could destroy us and the evidence." Ethan froze, but Kera reacted instantly. She grabbed his arm and pulled him behind a rock ledge, her body shielding him from detection. The drone passed without noticing them. "You think fast under pressure," Kera said, her voice low but approving. "That is why you will survive. That is why humans can matter, even in a universe that underestimates them." Ethan's hands shook as he processed what he had seen, but Kelara's steady presence reminded him of their purpose. They had survived the day, captured proof of the Council's crimes, and remained alive to fight another day. "You are stronger than you realize, human," Kera said as they rested. "Not in muscle, but in mind and spirit. That is something the Council cannot comprehend. That is why we have a chance. Bravery without strategy is death." The Council may have believed humans were weak, expendable, and inconsequential, but Ethan and Kera were about to prove them wrong. In the heart of the alien desert, hidden from the Empire's all-seeing eyes, the human and the warrior prepared for the challenges ahead. The path would be dangerous, filled with ambushes, patrols, and traps. But together they were more than survival. They were a force that could change the fate of countless lives. And as they sat under the twin moons, scanning the horizon for signs of the enemy, Ethan realized something profound. Even in a universe ruled by stronger beings, humans could endure, adapt, and prevail. Courage, morality, and ingenuity were weapons the Council could not counter. The night was far from over, but hope had taken root. The dawn came slowly over the jagged mountains, casting pale light across the desert landscape. Ethan and Kera crouched at the edge of a rocky cliff, overlooking the Council's facility below. From this height, the sprawling complex seemed even more formidable. Towers of steel and glass glinted in the morning sun, sensors scanned the air in every direction, and patrols moved along precise paths like clockwork. Every inch of the place was fortified. "This is worse than I imagined," Ethan whispered, his voice tight. "It's huge and heavily guarded. But nothing is impenetrable. There are weaknesses, blind spots, and today we exploit them." Ethan followed her lead, impressed by how her instincts combined with her disciplined training. "Your mind is faster than most humans I have encountered," Kera said softly as they crept along the ledge. "But remember, hesitation can be fatal. Focus, act, and move." The evidence they needed was inside the very heart of the Council's operations, and failure meant death, or worse, the loss of countless lives. They reached a point where the cliffside sloped down into a series of narrow canyons that led directly toward the facility's rear entrance. Kera paused, gesturing for Ethan to stay low. "This path is lightly monitored, but we must move slowly. Sensors are hidden along the walls. Step carefully." "There," he whispered. "I can override it with this device." They entered the perimeter of the facility, sticking to shadows and using natural cover wherever possible. Ethan's device picked up energy fluctuations inside the main structure, pulses that confirmed the weapon was active and lives were at risk. The two moved closer, hearts pounding with anticipation. Kera paused behind a wall, her eyes scanning the patrols. "We wait for the shift change," she whispered. "Fewer guards will notice us then." He had seen the evidence before, but being this close made it all too real, the scale of the Council's cruelty, the lives at stake. Finally, the moment came. Patrols shifted, and Kera motioned for Ethan to follow her into a narrow service tunnel. Inside, the walls were lined with conduits carrying energy and data signals. Ethan marveled at the technology, noting how advanced it was, and how humans could never have imagined something like this without first-hand experience. "This way," Kera whispered, leading him deeper into the heart of the facility. They arrived at a control room with a large observation window overlooking the testing chambers. Inside, civilians were moved with precision into energy containment pods. Pulses of light surrounded them as the weapon absorbed their life force. Ethan's stomach churned, but he steadied himself. He had to record everything. Ethan activated his device, capturing images, energy readings, and schematics of the operation. Every detail mattered. Kera kept watch, alert for patrols or sensors, her movements silent and precise. Suddenly, a group of guards entered the hallway behind them. Kera reacted instantly, pressing Ethan into the shadow of a control panel. Her body blocked the line of sight, her hand subtly triggering a small device that created a temporary energy interference. The guards paused, confused, then moved on without noticing them. "You are quick on your feet," Kera whispered. "Keep thinking like this and we will succeed." Strength is not just physical, human. Courage, intelligence, and morality, these are weapons no Council device can counter. Humanity, he realized, was capable of more than survival. It could adapt, innovate, and outthink even the most disciplined alien forces. Finally, they reached the central chamber of the weapon. Ethan's device recorded the core systems, the energy amplifiers, and the containment mechanisms. Kera studied the layout, calculating the risk and the escape routes. "This is it," she said softly. "Proof enough to show the Empire what the Council has done. Now we leave before they notice our presence. Follow me." The open space was dangerous, but it provided a chance to break through the perimeter defenses. Kera pointed to a narrow canyon leading out of the facility. "Through there, move fast, human." The pulse of fear surged through him, but so did determination. He would survive, he would carry the evidence, he would help save lives. Reaching the canyon, they slipped through narrow crevices, the facility shrinking behind them. Kera paused, listening for signs of pursuit. "We're not out of danger yet," she warned. The council will send reinforcements once they realize the intrusion. But we have the proof, that is what matters. But with careful planning, strategy, and courage, we can make the truth undeniable. Humanity's resilience, he realized, was a powerful force, even against the most advanced alien technology. By nightfall, they reached a hidden plateau, safe for the moment. Ethan collapsed, exhausted but exhilarated. Kera handed him water and a small ration, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We are close to our goal," she said, "but the real challenge is only beginning. We must present this evidence to the Empire without giving the Council a chance to stop us." Ethan and Kera sat together, reviewing their plans, studying patrol movements, and preparing for the journey ahead. Danger was everywhere, but so was hope. Ethan realized that this mission had changed him. He was no longer just a researcher, a human out of place. He was a participant in a fight for justice, a partner in a struggle that could alter the course of the Empire. And beside him, Kera, fierce, disciplined, loyal, had become more than an ally. She was a protector, a mentor, and perhaps in time a companion bound by shared purpose and respect. The night stretched on, the desert silent except for the distant hum of the Council's facility. And as the stars sparkled overhead, Ethan felt a sense of certainty. Humans could endure, humans could adapt. And humans could fight, not just to survive, but to uphold justice and morality in a universe that often seemed indifferent. Kera placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rest now, human," she said softly. "Tomorrow the real work begins, and we will face it together." Not because the path ahead would be easy, but because he had courage, knowledge, and Kera by his side. And together, they would make the Council pay. The first light of dawn painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan and Kera stood on the edge of a high plateau, overlooking the city where the Council's power was concentrated. The sprawling towers gleamed in the sunlight, their perfect symmetry a false mask over the corruption hidden within. Today was the day they would act, not with violence but with truth. Kera's sharp eyes scanned the city. "We have to move carefully. This is the heart of the Empire. The Council's influence here is absolute. One wrong step and they will crush us, and the evidence with no hesitation. Strength lies in courage and strategy, human. Remember that. You have both." As they approached the central communication hub, Ethan's pulse quickened. This was the nerve center of the Council, where all broadcasts and data transmissions originated. If they could broadcast the evidence from here, every planet in the Zarathian Empire would see the truth. Kera crouched beside him, scanning the area. "There," she whispered, pointing to a small entrance shielded by automated barriers. "It's lightly guarded. We can slip through if we move fast." Guards moved along predetermined paths, unaware of the two intruders moving silently among them. Kera's precision and Ethan's analytical mind allowed them to navigate the facility without triggering alarms. They reached the main control console, a massive array of holographic screens and control panels. Ethan connected his device, the screens lighting up as the evidence of the Council's crimes flooded the system. Images of civilians in energy containment chambers, energy readings of the weapon in operation, and documentation of the Council's manipulation streamed across the network. "Start the broadcast," Kera whispered. Ethan hesitated only a moment, then activated the transmission. Across the Empire, messages began to spread. Holographic projections appeared in public squares, ships, and communication hubs. Citizens of Zarathia and allied planets watched in shock and disbelief as the true extent of the Council's crimes became undeniable. Alarms blared. Guards rushed into the control room, but Kera and Ethan were already moving. Kera blocked their path, using her combat skill to hold them off just long enough for Ethan to finish the transmission. Humans may have been weaker in physical strength, but their courage and ingenuity had outsmarted even the Council's best. The broadcast reached every corner of the Empire. Citizens saw what had been hidden, families torn apart, lives stolen, and a weapon that violated every law of morality. Anger and outrage spread rapidly. Protests erupted, demanding justice, accountability, and the removal of the corrupt Council. Ethan and Kera slipped through a maintenance exit just as reinforcements arrived. Outside, the city streets were alive with chaos and calls for justice. Citizens no longer feared the Council, they were demanding change. Kera turned to Ethan, her expression a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "You did well, human. You were brave, precise, and clever. Humanity can inspire even those who believe in absolute obedience." "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. Your courage and skill, it saved me more times than I can count. By nightfall, word spread that the council had been overthrown. Those who had hidden behind power were now exposed, fleeing into hiding or facing the justice of their people. Kera and Ethan observed from a distance, knowing their mission had succeeded. Ethan's mind raced with the implications. Humanity had always been underestimated, seen as weak and insignificant in the vast universe. But now humans had proven they could endure, think, and act when it mattered most. Courage, ingenuity, and morality were weapons no alien technology could counter. Kera studied him, a small smile on her face. "The Empire will never see humans the same way again," she said. "And I will never forget what you have shown me." New leadership emerged, promising transparency, justice, and protection for all citizens. Humans were given recognition and representation in interstellar councils, their courage and moral clarity celebrated rather than ignored. Kera and Ethan continued to work together, bridging the gap between human ingenuity and Zyrathian skill. Their partnership, born of necessity and danger, had evolved into mutual respect and trust. They trained, planned, and advised on reforms, using their experiences to prevent future atrocities. One evening, they stood together on the edge of the city, looking out over the desert that had once been so dangerous. The twin moons reflected off the sands, a reminder of the harsh world they had survived. "You know," Kera said softly, "I was taught to trust only my instincts, my warriors, and the rules of the council. But you showed me that morality and courage are just as important, that even humans can inspire change. It's protecting what is right, even when it's dangerous. You taught me more than I could have imagined." As the moons rose higher, casting silver light across the landscape, Ethan and Kera made a silent promise to continue their mission. To protect the innocent, to fight injustice wherever it appeared, and to demonstrate that humans, though often underestimated, could change the course of history. In the heart of the Zyrathian Empire, human and alien stood together, a symbol of unity, courage, and hope. The council had fallen, truth had prevailed, and a new era was beginning, one where morality, ingenuity, and courage were celebrated above power alone. Ethan looked at Kera, and she met his gaze with equal determination. They had survived the impossible, exposed the unthinkable, and inspired a civilization to rise above corruption. Humanity had proven once again that even in a universe of superior strength and advanced technology, courage, ingenuity, and morality could triumph. The desert wind whispered across the sands, carrying with it the echoes of change. Together they would continue to shape the future, a human and a Zyrathian warrior, united by trust, courage, and the shared belief that justice was worth fighting for. And as the stars sparkled above, Ethan realized that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, full of dangers, challenges, and opportunities, but humans were not just survivors. Humans were catalysts for change, capable of standing against injustice, inspiring hope, and protecting those who could not protect themselves. Kera placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of partnership and acknowledgement. "Together," she said. "Together," Ethan replied, his voice steady, full of purpose and pride. The twin moons shone over the desert, and for the first time, both human and Zyrathian felt the weight of victory, the promise of a brighter future, and the strength of an alliance that could endure any challenge. The council had fallen, but the legacy of courage, morality, and ingenuity would live on. And in that moment, Ethan knew that humans had not only survived, they had prevailed, inspired, and changed the course of the galaxy.